Welcome to the Realm Kast. I am your Mortal Kombat FANTiM, and with me as always is our co-host, our lore master Yanni. Welcome, Yanni.
Thanks, FANTiM. Although on this episode, I'm not sure I'm the only lore master.
Oh my gosh, you're right. We got multiple lore masters. So, in order of appearance on Realm Kast episodes, we'd like to welcome back The4thSnake, History Behind the Warrior, Brandon from channel Midnight Productions, and BruskPoet. Welcome, guys.
Hello.
What's going on, everybody?
Hey.
Hello.
All right, so for those of our fans who don't know who you are, who haven't listened to our previous episodes with you, do you guys mind going through and giving a little introduction of yourself?
I'm the guy who hates on NetherRealm constantly. I never have anything nice to say about them. I'm just a hater who loves the franchise despite that. And of course, I think I can write the stories better than the actual writers can.
That's the $4thSnake, all right. And History Behind the Warrior.
I guess I'm the other hater. No, I'm kidding. General idiot, lore nerd, pro commentator for a long-time Mortal Kombat fan, do the history of breakdown and analyses. I feel like it's all in the name. It's all in the name, of course, but I think I'm a big lore buff of the series, been a big fan for a very long time, and we're here today to talk about some more Mortal Kombat. So once again, I speak for pretty much everyone here, and we say thank you for having us on.
Thank you guys all for joining us.
Thank you.
And Brandon.
I'm an independent filmmaker, and what most people care about is the fact that I leaked a lot of information on the movie production and kind of went through some of the drafts of the screenplays.
All right, and last but not least, BruskPoet.
Hey, everybody. I am BruskPoet. I am also not a hater of the NetherRealm. We're breaking the streak. No, I'm over here as a Mortal Kombat YouTuber and also streamer who does talk a lot about the lore, but also is somebody who talks just in general terms of Mortal Kombat. I talk about almost anything I have an opinion about because that's what the internet is about. So that's basically all that I have to say.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us again. It's a pleasure having you back. The topic of discussion for this episode is, does origin or racial influence matter in Mortal Kombat? Now, for the sake of this discussion, we're not actually going to be stating our individual origins. However, this group is made up of multiple different origins. So I guess we'll get started. We're going to bring up certain characters, species, origins, etc., and just basically discuss them. So I'd like to raise the point of Sub-Zero first. Do we all remember his origin in the previous timeline?
American Chinese.
American Chinese, yes.
And as far as I know, in the reboot era, they haven't seemed to have continued that. That seems to have been retconned in some way. Has it not?
It looks like it, because when you look at his story vignettes from 2011, the parents did seem to be living in China. So it looked like they've removed the American part of it, which I assume was just to explain why, say, John Turk was playing Sub-Zero in MK3 and he didn't look particularly Chinese. But now he just seems to have gone full Chinese, even though he's voiced by Steve Bloom.
And in the original timeline, was there any identification for his father or mother? Like, why one of them were American?
His father was Chinese and his mother was American. And that's what we know. That was from MK Mythology's website, because that is where all the lore was at. You can't find it now. You have to go to like a one of those websites, like
Wayback Machine.
Yeah, Wayback Machine. That's what you have to do. So that's how you find it. So that's why some people don't know that. But I remember that specific detail, that his father was Chinese and his mother was American.
So I guess the question kind of is, does this matter that he comes across as fully Chinese now in the new timeline?
For me, not particularly. I'm more concerned about the fact that the aspects of the story surrounding that heritage, like the fact that you had a sister and she and their mother were left in America while their father took the two brothers back to China. I'm more concerned with how that didn't go anywhere when you could do a lot with that. But as far as change him to be fully Chinese, it's an inconsistency, and you know what I'm like when it comes to inconsistencies in MK. But I think it's not that big a deal. I mean, it's not like the fact that he's Chinese or Chinese American ever really came up in either timeline anyway. Mm-hmm. So not much has really come of it anyway. So it's kind of moot at this point for him, I think. That
brings up a good point, though. The whole sister thing, that led a lot of speculation that maybe Frost was somehow related to.
Oh my God,
the necromancers.
Fiction intensifies.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, look, I wasn't around during those days on MKO. I came very, very late on MKO, but from the people who were around in MKO, I hear that is all the discussion when Frost was eventually came to Deadly Alliance, because the sister stuff was revealed first in mythologies. But when Frost came up, everyone started making that connection, and then I know somebody who like was super furious, like, no, that can't work. That's just so stupid.
History, you got anything to add to this?
Not necessarily. I don't feel like his racial background really plays an influence into anything. Mostly because there's nothing that he has gameplay wise or character wise that kind of exuberates or honors his heritage outside of being a member of the Lin Kuei. You know, that's kind of Bi-Han was Lin Kuei first and foremost, whereas Kuai Lang was a little bit different in that respect. He respected the qualities of the Lin Kuei, but understood the aspect of humanity and like the direction that it needed to be taken in order to be much more in touch with the world. So I don't feel like his racial influence is his like a character defining trait, you know? I feel like Lin Kuei first and foremost is his home, how he was raised, and where basically most of his character does originate from. I will say I don't know how I feel about in the new current continuity, because of course, like, they may have deviated away from the new thing, but I know they're trying to do this whole everyone's a kind of an Edenian, but not an Edenian type of thing. So maybe that kind of comes through in his moveset a little bit. But even then, he wouldn't actually know anything about that.
You know, the whole Lin Kuei versus the Shiraiyu, it brings about this whole triad ninjas versus Yakuza ninjas. So, if anything, I think it kind of emphasized that point.
One of the things I'll say is it was never really a big deal with me regarding whether Sub-Zero was fully Chinese, half Chinese, or even to the point where if you look at how they adapted the character throughout various media, where he was played by a Frenchman in the 1995 movie, and then for the TV series, he's played by, was that J.J. Perry?
In the TV series? Yes, I think, yeah.
Yes.
For Conquest, yes.
So one of the aspects that I liked was because the lore back then was never solidified. I like the idea, at least during that time period, where there was the possibility that Sub-Zero's family wasn't really his family. I know that at the very least, Threshold Entertainment decided to do the idea that the Lin Kuei kidnapped children and then train them in their compound. So I like the idea that there's the potential for Sub-Zero's family to not actually be his family. And I always wondered if at that time that they didn't have actual names, but it would have been, was Bi-Han and Kuai Liang, were they blood related brothers, or were they just two people and they were given to a family within the Lin Kuei who also were formerly children of different people that were kidnapped? And it kind of made sense at the time that they had non-Chinese assassins because they were supposed to be able to blend in. So it made sense to me that Sub-Zero would be half American, Cyrax was Black, and it was just a neat idea that they just kidnapped random children everywhere and then trained them so that they have operatives that can blend in into different cultures. So that was kind of the idea that I had over the years was, well, maybe they're not all related. So it could be that just for the sake of clarity, Bi-Han, the original Sub-Zero, like he could potentially be fully Chinese, but then you have the younger brother who's actually American because John Turk playing him in Mortal Kombat 3, it just kind of obviously was not a character played by a Chinese person.
Well, yeah, that's what I think that the idea was that Bi-Han was the like more Chinese looking brother and Kuai Liang was the more American looking brother. I do think that could have been just an explanation as to why, like, they both don't look Chinese, that they have American blood in there as well, and then one of them just looks more American. But at the same time, when that bit of information was revealed, that was in mythologies, and they weren't revealed to be brothers until Deception. So it makes me wonder if they had plans all along. I don't know if they had plans all along for them to be brothers, but I know it was speculated on, like, for a long time. It's been a speculative thing in the MK community back in those days. Although I can't speak for that 100% because I wasn't around during that time. From the fans that I talked to that did, that's the general consensus, is that people did question whether or not Bihan or Noob Saibot and Sub-Zero were related in some way or something like that. In terms of like if it matters or not, I don't think it really does. I mean, look, the song Chinese Ninja Warrior, but the guy looks American. You know, if you want to go full on with the Chinese, sure, you can go ahead and do that. I think it's fine. You could still say that he looks American. I mean, he looks American. That he is American. That he has the American blood in him from his mother. But he just looks Chinese. You can do that. It's fine. It doesn't really matter. It's like, is this person half Mexican or not? Well, if you're Mexican, you're Mexican. So I don't really think it matters too much. So
in MK3, obviously we had John Turk as Sub-Zero, and he was kind of a departure from the original designs of the ninja, right? We'd known them to be masked ninja this whole time. And in MK3, we finally get to see one of the ninja unmasked. And I feel like this sort of set in kind of in stone for how they were going to take the origin for Sub-Zero. It's like, hey, we have a guy who's just straight up looks white. So, you know, we're going to have to explain that somehow. And yeah, he's half American, half Chinese. And that fits very well. And as mentioned already, it works very well for the Lin Kuei as a whole to have different members from different places so that they could actually, you know, fit in wherever they went.
Yeah.
But then on top of that, I feel like it was actually revisited sort of with MKX. To me, Sub-Zero's MKX design was actually a callback to his MK3 design.
Sure.
I would say that Sub-Zero in MKX actually looked quite American still, rather than just being purely Chinese. Whereas in MK11, it seems to have, well, turned on its head. I know that MK9 was where the sort of retcon sort of began, I guess. But I still feel that MKX took the design inspiration from MK3 in terms of facial aesthetics, right?
Yeah, MKX just kind of like, well, I mean, this is what he looks like in the original game, so I guess we'll do it. But then I guess like I guess in the next game they kind of changed it.
Yeah,
I don't know why they did.
Yeah. One of the things that I found very infuriating about the current 3 games, the remake, X, and 11, was how all the designs, even though everything is sculpted in 3D, every single character seemed like it changed between each installment. And I found that so fucking irritating, where it just seemed like every game Johnny Cage looks completely different than the previous installment. Same thing with Shang.
Well, there's multiple factors that go into it, although I understand where you're coming from. I think multiple factors go into like why that is because one, like technology, they get better access to technology. And 2, sometimes the characters are supposed to look older and stuff. But if you have the opportunity to make something look better and it's going to come at a cost of making it look very, very different from the previous iteration, I think I honestly will take the thing that looks better. Because I like the way everybody looks in 11. I don't care that Kurt Tagawa's likeness was not in MK9 or in the concept art of MKX or something like that. Like, I really don't care. Like, give me something that's actually good. And I'm not, I know it kind of sounds, I don't care about inconsistency. But to me, that doesn't, I don't know. To me, that never really bothered me. It bothered me sometimes, but it really, to me, it's like, okay, well, I have the opportunity to have Kerry Tagawa Shang Tsung, but consistency-wise, you should want this regular Shang Tsung. What am I going to take? I'm going to take Kerry Tagawa Shang Tsung. So I'm kind of left with no choice here. And I'm pretty sure the developers have, they kind of are also having that question in mind.
Yeah, it's also because of the new engine they're using as well. It's a hybrid version of Unreal 3, I believe. And unlike, because I feel altered. Like what's also gone on with that, and I've noticed it a lot recently, as ever since kind of Capcom introduced visual facial scans and tracing with their games, it's kind of being implemented by other individuals, and NRS definitely took a step out of their book in that sense of, because I was very fortunate to go there, that they have like 64 different cameras to basically scan someone's face and use it and implement it and like put those faces on different bodies. And that one of the big reasons as to why they've done that is the visual graphical upgrade another aspect is because as much as I do really enjoy MKX, those faces, despite being hand sculpted, hasn't really aged too well, especially with the
Thank
color
you.
palette.
Thank you.
You know, I don't.
Damn, Liu Kang looks so fucking garbage.
I think Cassie's the biggest perpetrator for me. From X to 11, that's a glow up if there's ever been one.
Yeah,
For sure.
Back on the topic of Sub-Zero, I mean, this isn't the first time he has changed race. If you look back on Mortal Kombat 2,
Mhm.
you know, everybody knows he was played by Daniel Pesina, but there's one section, I think it was one of his endings, where he's unmasked. And
Yeah.
Josh Tsui from Insert Coin documentary
Yes.
was playing Sub-Zero back then. And he's very Asian.
True.
So,
Very
yeah.
true.
yeah. And up John Turk for the next game. I mean, it's very different looking character.
Well, the
Yeah.
other thing too is the fact that there's an inconsistency there with that character within the game, because you look at John Tobias with his artwork for the character, and really the artwork at that time was the only thing that really kept the game tied together, I thought, because, you know, they did switch actors for some of the characters with each installment. So it was the artwork and the portraits of the characters that kind of kept that consistency together. But if you look at his artwork for Sub-Zero in Mortal Kombat 2, and then you look at the comic book, which Mortal Kombat 2 comic book actually had Sub-Zero completely out of his uniform, wearing a business suit. And it was funny because he actually looks like the John Turk iteration of Sub-Zero.
Mm.
So I found that kind of a neat point, that he looked like a certain way for the comic book, and then within, you know, the game that's made by the same person that did the comic book, they utilized the completely different face onto an actor's body.
Yes. So I think it's a good point to move on to another character also within the Lin Kuei.
There's one thing I would just like to add is, ironically, despite being, you know, of Chinese heritage, Sub-Zero, they've kind of leaned more towards the Japanese. Like in the 3D era, his weapon was the Kori blade, Kori being Japanese for ice, I believe, not something in Chinese. And now he's got all these kunai because he's a ninja, but that's Japanese, not Chinese. In some ways, he plays more into the Japanese element than Scorpion, who is actually Japanese. And I feel like some of the armor is a bit more Japanese in some ways as well.
I assume that maybe that comes with, like, this guy has been hanging around with Scorpion for a long time. Maybe some influence was put onto him right there. But yeah, that's 100% correct.
I mean, the funniest part to me is that he actually ends up using hammers and axes instead of everything else he's got as an assassin.
Well, it's not as bad as the troll hammer for Noob Saibot.
I mean, Noob Saibot's entire character at that point in time was trolly, really. But speaking of the Lin Kuei kidnapping,
yeah,
one important member who was kidnapped was Smoke. Now, Smoke got a white background change in MK9, with his background being said to be that he was actually from the Czech Republic, and his name was Thomas Verbada.
That was one of my favorite parts of MK9's lore, was the reveal of, like, his real name and things, and, like, his, like, kind of like origins, because it's always been very, very vague.
Smokey.
Yeah. Oh my god. You know what? I was thinking about that. I was thinking about, like, Cloudy Smokey. I was like, wait. I literally didn't want to do it. He did it.
I mean, was that a change, or was it a addition to his lore?
I think it was an addition, because I don't recall it ever coming up before. Because Smoke, he doesn't really, it never had much of a character, partly because he's always been mind controlled pretty much.
Yeah.
So it never really delved into his actual character and backstory. So all we really knew was he was Sub-Zero's friend who got converted. And I'm not even sure if MK3 itself mentioned they were friends. That may have just come later. But there was no mention of his nationality prior to 2011, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, and also, like, I think it was an additional piece of lore, because with that, it also kind of explained how he has smoke powers and things in MK9. So yeah, it's more of an added on information, because, like I mentioned, and Snake mentioned as well, he's never really been much of a character too much. That he hasn't been too developed before MK9. He still isn't, but yeah.
And now he's dead.
Yeah. And for some reason, Sub-Zero does not mention Smoke at all. His best friend, who is not MK11, He just doesn't mention him at all.
It takes Noob bringing it up for him to talk about him.
Yeah, I know.
That's your friend, Smoke.
That's some friend you have there, Smoke.
Don't get to say that name.
He's like Thomas Verbata. Who? It's a good addition in the sense that not just that, like, it actually sheds further light on Smoke's origins and gives him further, like, character building. But on top of that, it actually does, in a way, add some representation. Now, I have a Czech friend who was actually really psyched at the fact that Smoke is from the Czech Republic. And he said, you know, I liked Smoke, but I never cared too much for him. But now that, you know, he's been given this origin, it's actually really cool because I feel like there's a lot more to him and I can sort of relate to him in a way. And I always found that quite interesting.
I always saw like the appeal for characters in Mortal Kombat. For the characters that they are, it doesn't matter what race they are or where they're from. I was appealed to the Mortal Kombat characters because of just the characters. Like I relate a lot with Liu Kang. I like Liu Kang a lot. That's my favorite character, but I'm not Chinese. But I understand that if you want to like appeal this character to some people, just making them more transparent, or you putting some more transparency on their origins and things, and including where they're from, is actually it could be very, very beneficial.
Was the transparency upon Smoke again?
I was like, is that a genuine question, or is that? Oh,
I think one of the best examples of making a character into something more relatable was what they did with Cyrax. So in Mortal Kombat 4 or Mortal Kombat Gold, it was revealed that Cyrax was actually a black person underneath his costume. And then we learned in later Mortal Kombat 9 that he's from Botswana. And, you know, seeing Cyrax in his human form with his dreadlocks and his, like, being Botswanian, it brought in a lot more love for that character that I think, you know, everybody liked cyber ninjas before, but at that point, it kind of created a new fan base for him.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for like that again. That's one of my favorite things about MK9 was more transparency, or just more lore addition to the cyber ninjas and Smoke and, you know, Tomas Verbata and things like that. And I've always wanted to know, like, what is Sector's real name? What is Cyrax's real name? I think there was like a leak somewhere that leaked some of the mobile game bios or something like that. And then I think NetherRealm came up with a name. I don't think it's real though, but I still really, really like want to know their names and things like that.
One thing I found interesting about Sector was it ever given what his nationality actually is?
Japanese.
Chinese.
You sure he's not Japanese?
Yeah, because he's the son of the Grandmaster of the Lin Kuei and Chinese.
Here's the interesting part of it is that in the previous timeline, he relocated the Tekujin, which is a Japanese word. He relocated the Tekujin to Japan, if I remember.
Yes.
Yes.
So I found that really interesting that when he was trying to take over Lin Kuei, he was taking all
I think that happened in the Game Boy edition, of Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance, where he tried to take over Japan.
Yeah, there's an aspect of that, and then I think that was even repeated in Armageddon. The idea that
I don't know if like the taking over Japan part was. I assume like maybe it already happened, or like I assume it's still there, but the Takunin part is still there. Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, I just found that really interesting, and that was another aspect, kind of getting into the idea that not all of the Lin Kuei are Chinese, that they're actually from all over the world. And then that gets back to my own concept in my head. Like I said, with both Sub-Zeros not actually being brothers, it makes me wonder if he was actually the biological son of the Grandmaster, or whether he was a child stolen and it's like, I'm adopting him to be my heir.
So
that's a good point.
Sector actually had a racial swap also in Mortal Kombat Defenders of the Realm. He was a black character.
Well, he was black? I didn't watch Defenders of the Realm.
He was black and had dreadlocks. And Cyrax was Asian. So they basically swapped them around.
Yeah, wow, they just full on wow. Okay.
That's hilarious. That's hilarious. I did not know that.
Yeah, and I remember that being weird when what was it? 3 years later, starting with Gold, when they actually showed Cyrax, as the black character, and it kind of like swapped a little bit. I will give Defenders of the Realms props where they actually did at the time when none of the ninjas really had a lot of personality outside of Scorpion and Sub-Zero, to actually try and give each of them a unique look, where I think just about every ninja took their mask off at some point in that show.
Even Ermac. Do you remember Ermac's face?
Yes.
Little like soul patch in the earring.
Yes.
Okay. That I do remember. I've seen that memed.
That's what Jared should look like.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead, make him look that way.
Assuming he hasn't been killed by one of the 24 people.
I think that the way Ermac looks is influenced from Jared, so I think I'd be down for that.
I'm just still surprised by the race swap. I feel like in my head it was done by accident, and they were like, "Shit, we can't do it now. It's too late. We gotta put it out. We gotta put it out."
They didn't intend for them to switch, but they realized that they did. So they're like, "Shit, well, the guys, we just put it out there anyways. Who gives a shit?"
It's like, hey, so this character's from here now, and this character's from here. Wait, did you not watch Defenders of the Realm?
Little did they know that'd be talked on a podcast about 15 years later.
They're like, shit, you made the red one? It was supposed to be the yellow one.
You can't just say that.
Bumbling across the finish line is the MK way and always has been.
It is kind of interesting that Defenders of the Realms Threshold Entertainment was ahead of its time with showing both characters with, different nationalities, which we already know they had inside information from Midway, because Defenders of the Realm was the first appearance of Quan Chi. I mean, I remember watching Defenders of the Realm and like, well, who the fuck is this guy? It was like
Cole Turner.
They're just, it was one of those. So I remember
it was like Cole Turner type of character.
Yeah, and I remember just thinking, well, this must be one of their creations. That's fucking stupid. And then Mortal Kombat 4 comes out, and I'm like, oh my God.
I feel stupid now.
Well, I assumed that maybe like Tobias, because they were being made at the same time. I think Defenders of the Realm and Mythologies and MK4 were being made at the same time. So maybe
it's about a year difference.
Yeah, so like I assume that in that year, like Tobias is like, oh hey, I'm working on this character. You can put him in here if you want, or here's some of the ideas I have.
I'm pretty sure I've read something that specifically states he did that.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's what I assume happened.
What about the actual, I guess, importance of them having their origins sort of stated so clearly? With Sector, for example, it actually ties in very closely to his actual story and to the Mortal Kombat story. So if we have the Lin Kuei being this clan of Chinese assassins, I almost said ninja, Sub-Zero was
Did you just call me the
and
N-word?
then we have
I'm sorry to interrupt, but like the joke that I made when I watched some of the like cutscenes from Mythologies, because Quan Chi would regularly mock Sub-Zero as Bihan as a ninja, even though they're not ninjas. So like I
am no ninja.
Yeah, like I always imagine Bihan like, did you just call me the N-word, sorcerer?
And then decades later, he's seeking the N-word pass.
Yeah. Finish your point. I'm sorry, I just had to bring that up.
I was just going to say that the importance of Sector actually being said to be Chinese. Now, whether or not he's actually the son of the Grand Master of the Lin Kuei, or sort of like, in a way, an adoptive son, I still feel like it actually has relevance and adds to his character, which I feel is one of the best ways for this sort of influence to be made on the story itself, if you get what I mean.
But at the same time, him being his son, does that mean he was adopted, like kidnapped, like all the others? Or?
No, I think he actually is. Sector is actually the son of the Grand Master, the Lin Kuei. I think that's actually like what it is.
I would say he is the son. Like his bio actually specifically states he is the son of the Grand Master.
I feel like if he was adopted, it would have been mentioned specifically that he was adopted, and not just say his son.
Yes.
Yeah, it would have been mentioned.
And that gets into another interesting aspect, is because we don't know everything about the Lin Kuei. is it possible that only the Grandmaster can have biological children so that only his lineage can lead the Lin Kuei? And that's why there's the possibility that, Bai Han and Kuai Liang are not biological brothers, at least in the old canon. That way they wouldn't be able to lay claim to trying to take over the Lin Kuei.
Well, in the original timeline, the two brothers were fourth generation Lin Kuei, I believe. That's mentioned in the on the Mythology's website. That their father was a Lin Kuei sleeper agent, and then came back to reclaim them. So maybe, but I feel like again, it seems like the kind of thing where if these two were adopted by this Lin Kuei, it would have been mentioned specifically that they were adopted and not just saying they were his sons.
And that point actually ties in very well to what we said earlier about the Lin Kuei, I guess, having different members from different places. Because if their father was a sleeper agent in America and he was American, that would make a lot of sense with that point.
I think it also further drives the point of the Lin Kuei's hatred for Japan and having that emphasized in MK Deadly Alliance in the Game Boy edition, where where he had the Dakunin take over Japan. I think that it just adds more on to the story of the Lin Kuei and the story of Sector and things like that. The Lin Kuei's hatred for Japan. So I think it is important. So if there's any thought of it not being the case, I think that's kind of ridiculous.
Just curious, what was there actually this hatred for Japan or just this shit out of you?
Well, I think it was a commentary of China versus Japan. I think that's always kind of been an implied story bit with the Lin Kuei versus the Shirai Ryu, was Japan versus China and the Chinese hating the Japanese and things like that, and just a rivalry there. So I think that's always kind of been there. I don't think it's been explicit, but I know it's kind of been implied, a commentary.
That could explain somewhat why Sub-Zero is so against being called the ninja. That's a Japanese term. We are not the Japanese.
Yeah, possibly.
Just remembering my joke.
And then his brother starts using Japanese ninja tools. It's like Kuai Liang, what are you doing? I disown you in every way.
It's not as explicit or big, but they kind of still have that element there in MK11. And there's an intro where Sub-Zero's like, we're not ninjas. Stop. I think he clarified Lin Kuei are not ninjas or something like that.
I do find it quite interesting that Sector was given this background of being the son of the Grandmaster, when in the previous timeline he actually killed the Grandmaster.
He does in this one as well.
Yeah.
Does he?
Yeah,
Yes,
he does.
That's totally slipped my mind.
Yeah, he takes over between 2011 and the comic.
Ah, yes, you're right. Yes, okay. Totally skipped my mind.
Yeah, I think that was in his ending, I think. Was in his ending?
I think it was, yeah. Because that's where it's revealed that they were father and son, so that's why he killed him.
Yeah.
Okay, totally forgot about that. Wow. Like I said, not just one lore master here today.
Not to switch characters that we're talking about, but it is an interesting point because I don't know if we're going to get to this character specifically, because there are certain characters where their identities are already solidified. No one's going to question Liu Kang, for instance. He's obviously Chinese. And same thing with Scorpion. He's obviously Japanese. One of the characters that I find interesting, and there is two different interpretations of this, because you have Threshold Entertainment's attempts to actually give Shang Tsung a different backstory than what was within the original timeline. And you have Terry Haruki Tagawa's interpretation of the character. But you look at Shang Tsung. Shang Tsung is a Chinese name. It's Mandarin. In fact, Shang is one of the oldest dynasties within ancient China, with Tsung being a Mandarin surname. But I find it very interesting that, for example, for the new MK11, they picked Terry Haruki Tagawa to play him, as that nod to the 1995 film. And Terry Haruki Tagawa is Japanese. And obviously, there are different cultures and ethnicities within Asia itself. So there's a Japanese actor playing a character that is, you could kind of say, of Chinese origin, depending on which backstory you go with. Within the video games themselves, Shang Tsung isn't human, he's a demon, and he takes on a human form. Whereas Threshold Entertainment kind of threw all that away. And even Terry Haruki Tagawa has explained throughout a lot of the making of features and interviews that he sees him as And they actually ended up using that in the TV series Conquest, where Shang Tsung was a chosen one for Earthrealm, and then he betrayed Earthrealm and went to Outworld. In fact, I actually prefer that backstory rather than just he's a demon and he's always been evil.
I still kind of miss the demon sorcerer kind of thing. I don't think he's a demon, but I always kind of miss them calling Shang Tsung a demon sorcerer. I don't know if that started in the movie or like in the games. I think it started in the movie, but I miss that.
I know that John Tobias's original version of Shang Tsung was that he was a demon, and there is artwork out there to support that. Don't quote me on this, but I believe Shinnok's demon form is partially inspired by some of the concept art that they had for Shang Tsung's demon form. Now, one of the things that I really find interesting is the idea that Shang Tsung the demon is kind of mocking humanity in a sense, because he has a Chinese name, but if you look at Kari Haruki Togawa, he's Japanese. So there's kind of like that hint that something is off, because there are differences between Chinese and Japanese. So there's always that idea that there's just something slightly off with the character, where you look at him and like, well, you don't look Chinese. There's it kind of sounds odd to say, but I really like that idea that there's that little hint that he's lying in a sense, that he's not who he says he is.
And that fits his personality perfectly, I would say, as well.
It could still work with his human backstory because he is a shapeshifter.
Yes.
After all.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm glad that they went with an Asian actor for the role rather than what happened in Mortal Kombat 3, where because they were trying to keep their budget intact, I believe it was John Turk also played Shang Tsung in Mortal Kombat 3.
No, I don't think so. I think an Asian person actually played Shang Tsung. Oh, in MK3?
Yeah, in MK3.
Oh, I was thinking MK2. Sorry.
No. In Mortal Kombat 1, same actor that played Liu Kang also played Shang Tsung. And then in Mortal Kombat 2, they had two different actors play Liu Kang and Shang Tsung. But
they had two different ones.
But then by Mortal Kombat 3, it was like, at least before they got into Ultimate, it was like they had 6 actors and they played all the roles. So I always found that hilarious. At just how they kind of get around their budget limitations. But it was still kind of odd. And I'm glad that they didn't repeat that after MK3, where they had Caucasian playing an Asian character, because that's a little bit too on the nose that he's not human. Whereas I like the subtlety of it with Kari Haruki Togawa playing a character with a Chinese name, where it's just slightly inaccurate, just enough to, like, if you can really pick up the differences, you're like, this guy, I don't think he's from China.
That kind of ties into the Mortal Kombat Legacy series. Season 1, we had the first Shang Tsung actor, which I think was Chinese descent. I'm not sure. But then, of course, in Season 2, they brought back Kari for that. And like somebody said earlier, Shang Tsung being a shapeshifter, it works for kind of every iteration of Mortal Kombat. He can fit into whatever we have out there.
Sure.
No, it's a very interesting interpretation, which actually ties into the topic very well. Like, that is a different way that, racial or origin influence actually matters here, because it actually gives the character something more, in the sense that you don't know what's going on with them, and it actually pushes their personality or just general character in a different direction. That's a really cool interpretation. But why don't we move on from, I guess, humans and now possibly demons to the Edenians? Now, Edenians as a whole, I'm very curious to hear everybody's answer specifically to this question. But where, in your mind, do you feel like Edenians, just the actual realm, the people of the realm, what do you think their influence is in terms of origin and design?
What do you mean by that? Can you clarify what about their origins?
All right, so I guess the best way to clarify is to answer it myself first. Now, to me, the Edenians, I've always felt, have been very Persian inspired.
Okay.
I've always felt like the actual realm itself and the people, I guess the way of doing things, etc., were very Persian inspired. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, are you asking if I agree with that or not?
No, I mean, what do you think of the actual realm
Oh,
itself,
no, well-
in your opinion?
Well, first, yes, I kind of agree because I don't think Katana's had a lot of the Persian things. She has a little bit. I think maybe in Deadly Alliance. I forget which game there was a little bit of Persian influence with Katana's design. I really, really forget, but I know some Persian influence has been associated with Katana just a little bit. I know it's definitely there with Rain, but I always saw Edenia as very diverse. I always just saw them as, well, they're humans, but like, they're humans, but like they're kind of like special because of course they're from a different realm and things like that. But I always saw them as a very, very diverse culture because you look at Katana, she's Asian. If you look at like maybe Sindel, assumingly Sindel is also Asian. Jade is not Asian, but she's black, so she could be from the Middle East. She could be she's just black, so that just adds on to the diversity. And so I always just saw Edenia as a very, very diverse realm. I don't think it's always been one specific thing.
Yeah, for me, Edenia is kind of like Earth. There's different
because they're
regions.
humans, kind of.
Yeah, so they all have different backgrounds, different origins, different ethnicities, Edenian ethnicities. But as far as like where they get their influence from, I think it varies from character to character.
With Jade and Tanya, there's definitely some Middle Eastern influence. Like you look at Jade's outfit in Deception specifically. It's I'm not sure what about, maybe Turkish or so, because it looks somewhat like what you might expect a belly dancer to wear type thing. And then with Tanya, there's definitely some, I guess, Egyptian influence.
Yeah, there's Tanya is very, very Egyptian.
And then you got Katana's one of those characters people argue about till the cows come home, because a lot of people got mad when she was Asian in 11, but I looked at that and said, well, I thought she always was, because in my mind, Katana, like the base image of Katana is MK3.
Well, it's always been a debate, and I think you can do either one. Honestly, I don't. So I think you could expect that that Katana could be has some sort of Hispanic influence because of Talisa Soto, and I know a lot of people may have interpreted Katana as Hispanic or something like that, or she just has some Hispanic influence because of Talisa Soto, and I think she was played by a Latina actress in the arcade era. So
in MK2 at least she was.
Yeah,
I think it was Asian in 3.
So
I
let's,
think in 3. Yeah.
Let's stay on the topic of Katana then. History, what do you think?
Well, I think it goes with kind of the realms as a whole itself. I've always considered them like a slight mirror and like somewhat parody of our world itself, of that being Earthrealm. So there's always like different takes and different approaches. I mean, you literally have a guy who can snap his neck back and forward just to give you an idea of like the ridiculous nature of it. But I've always considered like Edenia like a mirrored world, a mirrored heavenly world of what Earth is in that sense, because Garden of Eden is in its name. So I've never considered it to be like part of just like this one region, right? So I don't imagine it's one region just made up of multiple different races, but just like a whole world in itself that's composed of different races and of different people and those of different heritage, which they kind of all do come from. It makes a little bit more sense in that, right? Because it explains why Jade looks different to Tanya, why Tanya looks different to Katana, why Sindel even looks different to Katana now. Like there's different visual features and different origins that somewhat allow a diverse race despite despite Earthrealm and Edenia being quite literally two worlds apart. I feel like that kind of better explains it.
Yeah, Sindel wears so much makeup. I can't even imagine trying to assign an ethnicity to be based on anything but her skin tone. So I've always kind of been shaky on the Sindel part.
She seems Caucasian.
Yeah,
but there's some Asian influence in it.
Well, yeah, I think it's whatever Katana is what Sindel is as well.
Yeah.
But see, that's interesting, because MK11, you have, okay, I know that it's been mentioned that many people here found Katana to always be Asian. To me, actually, when I said that Edenia was Persian, I meant more Middle Eastern, I guess. But I do agree with the concept of it being, a mirroring world with, people of all different sort of Edenian ethnicities. But Kitana, to me, was specifically one of those Persian influenced characters. And I find it very, very interesting in MK11. I myself am not a fan of the fact that she is now Asian influenced. I've always thought she's Persian, as I mentioned. But what's funny is that King Jared and, in my opinion, Queen Sindel both don't actually look Asian.
No.
Yet Kitana does look so quite heavily.
I think you could. I don't know. I think Sindel kind of looks like Asian. I think you can make it work.
Oh, definitely. There's features in it, most certainly on a visual basis, but I don't know, in terms of overall presentation, I think she comes across as far more Caucasian, which is very strange considering Jared's appearance and how Kitana's heritage. You know, it's a bit of a weird one.
I feel like there has always been some Japanese influence, specifically with Kitana. I mean, originally she was going to, if you see in the original notes for the MK1 story, she was going to be Princess Kitsune, which is obviously Japanese. And then maybe her name comes from Katana for the final game. I mean, that's not 100% because she was originally supposed to be Shang Lao's daughter when that was Shang Tsung. So the series kind of always had this almost just a generalized image of Asia as like one whole conglomerate, it seems. Yeah. Which, you know, whether or not that's appropriate, it's up to you. But there's definitely always been some heavy Asian influence over the whole series. I think Kitana is one of those.
I mean, even the logo.
Being from another realm, you can afford to mix and match clothing and architecture and cultures and things with different physical features. Because like a person dressed like they're from Japan doesn't mean they're Japanese, you know?
Yeah, well, Shao Kahn has a samurai helmet and no one ever look at him and say, well, he's clearly Japanese.
Yeah, yeah.
And doesn't Edenia itself have, in some of the endings, have kind of like Greek-style architecture in the background?
Yeah.
It fluctuates from game to game.
It's a shame we don't really get to go there very much to get a firm idea of what it looks like. That's why I've only had like 3 stages set there across the entire franchise.
Yeah.
What was Rain's father's name? The god?
Argus.
And that kind of feels like that has some Greek connotation.
Yeah, because that was Armageddon was where like the Greek mythology influence started. Yeah. Or that's the first kind of like Greek influence.
Like with the demigods and such.
Yeah.
Which is like more very common in Greek mythology. And Argus certainly has very Caucasian features. I mean, he's so Caucasian his hair's white.
Yeah.
What I kind of wonder is because there is so much history and mythology to the series, and there's a lot of conflicting information because you're looking at all the different writers and even the eras of the games themselves. But I kind of wonder with how they're expanding the universe and going about diversifying a lot of the characters, which is something I actually like because we have 90 established characters now within the Mortal Kombat universe. And we have representation of characters from different origins. But I kind of wonder if the idea is, well, first off, I do agree with some of you regarding Edenia that it's not just one culture and that there's different cultures within Edenia, because to go and say that it's only one culture, that kind of gets into that lazy Star Trek element and even Star Wars, where it's like, well, we have one planet with one environment and one culture. You know, that's lazy writing. Whereas Mortal Kombat seems to kind of be trying to branch out and make it a little bit more realistic with representation. And I always kind of wondered if they're trying to go about where Earth culture is influenced by other realms, and that even though we have the Elder Gods, is the idea that some of our ancient cultures had relations with some of these realms. So you have like the Greeks and the Middle East, and they were on relations with, say, Edenia, and that some of our ancient cultures were inspired by these other realms. And that's why you see a crossover of Earth cultures and little hints and pieces of their clothing, their architecture, and that's where we got a lot of that influence from. Now, I don't know if maybe they'll go that route in the future or if it was already established, but I do find that to be an interesting way of looking about why there's certain influences, characters that like rain, for instance. Like there's obviously influences from Earth culture, especially with his newest appearance. So is that possible that his culture interacted with Earth at some point?
There is some of that in the MKX comic with Kotal, because he went to Earthrealm as a rite of passage, and he ended up in a Mayan civilization.
Yes,
and then they started worshiping him as a god. So because it's mentioned as a rite of passage, it suggests that more of the Oshtek have done that in the past. So they seem to have influenced the Mayan civilization. So it does seem entirely likely that that is the case. We just don't hear about many instances of it.
I completely forgot about MexicoCon when we started preparing for this episode.
Well, I think if there's like one more thing that I will add on Katana is that, I feel like making Katana Asian, I feel like some people could interpret that as being too stereotypical. Like, well, she's a ninja, so she's kind of have to be Asian. But I feel like that's not. I feel like that's, to me, that doesn't bother me, but I can see why it could, and I can see why people would like, Latina Katana, because it makes her more interesting. That she's kind of like the first Latina kind of Edenian out there, or Edenian looking person in Mortal Kombat. So I feel like it could make Katana a little bit more interesting if she was more Talisa Soto.
Well, giving Talisa Soto the role of Katana brought a lot of representation to the Philippines.
Yeah, so I feel like Talisa Soto Katana is very, very, very important.
I'd like to drop a couple points on Argus, actually. We raised his character earlier. Now, you mentioned the Greek influence. Do you know of Argos Panoptes from the Greek mythology?
I am such an old country swine. I do not.
I've heard of the Argo, the ship, but that's as far as it goes.
I've heard of Argo, the movie.
All right. Well,
I've heard of the Argonauts.
Panoptes. Okay. You're all close. All right. In Greek mythology, Argos Panoptes is the many-eyed giant. Now, Panoptes is basically all-seeing, right? And here with Argus, I think we can sort of see the similarities in the sense that firstly, he's a god, right? Now, he's all-seeing, he's Argus, he's the god, and he and Delia, his wife, saw a prophecy for what was going to happen with Armageddon, right? Now, Delia is quite important here as well, because Delia is actually a Greek name. Delia is from the island of Delos, which is the island of Apollo and Artemis. Now, Apollo is the god of multiple different things, including, archery, music. But one important thing here is truth and prophecy, which relates right back to Argus and Delia. And I find the Greek influence here quite interesting, and also obviously quite vital to their characters, because it actually really helped along the plot. And you can see the inspiration that their characters and these origins had on them and the story itself.
Yeah, no, it isn't the first time they've pulled influence from stuff like that, because I'm in the process of talking about a very similar topic, funny enough, that involves it. Like, the one being, for example, is actually influenced by a Chinese titan called Panku.
Yeah, it's very Chinese inspired.
Yeah, so there's a lot of origins and ties from that, of how when the deity died, he left his body as like the ground, and like his breath as the wind, and his eyes as the sun and the moon, and how, gave birth to other god that would then basically bear humans and life from the remains of his body, and his body would become the playground of which humans could roam. Like, there's a lot of influence of that, and they always like pull these like different ideas, although like they're not as super direct, but there's definitely a lot of influence from old mythologies that they do actually bring in, which is pretty neat, in all honesty.
Funnily enough, Panku is mentioned in the 1994 Jeff Rovin novel as one of the gods.
Oh,
wow.
There we go.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, so it's a fun little tidbit of information as well.
And also, I like how you tied the Titans back and everything, history. Thanks for that.
I think we're all against the Titans, aren't we?
No, thank you, please.
Dude, that's some of the Greek influence that I wish didn't make it into the story.
Yeah, I think it went a little bit too overboard in MK11. I just please don't do the Titans again. I don't want them. I don't want to.
Yeah, in the past, it was all brought together quite subtly, I feel, and in a very cool and I mean, the creative way, whereas in MK11 it was done very heavy-handedly.
I just don't think galactic level beings really work in a fighting game. I'm not gonna lie.
No.
I think it's pretty outrageous.
I just no.
I think even the one being in itself, I think just works better as a concept than an actual idea. Because I'm just like, how far do we go past that line?
Yeah, even the one being, you could say that was I mean, I don't think it was, because I think John Vogel said that he didn't know, but I remember when the one being was revealed in Deception, some people brought up to John Vogel that, was this inspired from the MK movie novel? Because there's something in the MK movie novel that kind of mentions the one being, or something on the scale of the one being, basically just mentioning the one being, just kind of like just a subtle thing. And he said he had no idea. So you could say like it kind of started with the MK movie novelization.
Yeah, I took that the one being was just influenced by Chinese mythology.
Well, it was. I think that was the intent.
Is.
Yeah.
That was one of the things that I liked about the Jeff Roven novel, was the fact that he actually did study Chinese history, and he actually studied a lot of like really random aspects.
It's really old Chinese mythology and culture.
Yeah. I think even in that, Raiden was actually he used the Chinese concept that a lot of the gods weren't actually gods, but were mortals that became immortal by questing up a certain mountain, and through their devotion to the gods had actually obtained immortality, which was a concept that I wish they had brought into the video game, because I like that version of Raiden. But yeah, the whole Panku one being aspect of that, I always just took the one being to be that they were moving towards that. But it is kind of nice that there was something to predate it, so you had more of an idea on what it could actually represent.
Well, fighting up the mountain thing, doesn't that relate kind of back to Armageddon?
With Taven Dagon and the quest.
Yeah.
Just even just the pyramid itself as another possible influence. But yeah, I think Taven and Dagon is a great example of that. With, I guess, mentioning Taven and Dagon, let's go back to their half brother Rain. We've seen a lot of different designs for him over the years, and I myself have always felt that his design has been quite Middle Eastern influenced, quite heavily so, actually, with his Armageddon outfit, his MK9 sort of veil, his MKX crown and general design, and then with MK11, the addition of the Qatar, as well as just the overall themes in terms of all of his designs.
Yeah.
But there was a huge debate recently about Rain on whether or not he was, previously white and is now black, or if he's always been Middle Eastern.
Well, you can be Middle Eastern and black.
True.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like, one thing I find very, I guess, irritating about how in certain places in the world, mostly the West, it's that it seems to only be you can either be white or black. And there's a lot in between. And I feel that just saying whether a character is white or a character is black is just very, very basic. Now, with certain characters, I mean, with Rain, to me, for example, is brown.
Yeah.
And a shade of brown that I would say, like, okay, saying he's from the Middle East, somebody from the Middle East can be as white as somebody from, say, England. And even then, in England, you get all types of shades, right? But somebody from the Middle East can be whiter than the wall next to me, or darker than my mouse pad.
That's also the same as somebody who's Hispanic from Mexico. There's literally like white looking Mexicans out there. So like, yeah, I
exactly.
They're yeah. It's not black. It's not
even in Asia.
Even
typically
in Asia,
when you go around China, basically the north half of Asia typically has to have a brighter, more Caucasian white skin tone. But as you go deeper down, it comes like to the Mediterranean, around Thailand, Laos, that area, due to the humidity and just how the heat is, how the sun glares, you can actually get typically very darker skin tones. So you will actually come across some Oriental people who actually have like a black pigmented skin.
That's actually how I always pictured Jade to be from that area, personally.
Yes, totally agree.
It's definitely not between just like you can only either be white or black. There's definitely there's a lot more. I'll put like it's kind of like picking ice cream, right? You can either pick the same 2 flavors, or you can take a look at the rest of the board and see that there's actually way more than the only 2 you're picking right now.
That's the best analogy I've heard so far.
Craving ice cream. I apologize.
But one thing is that obviously you need to look at more than just, say, color of skin and such, right? And that's why I feel that certain other aspects are quite important. Now, as we've mentioned with the outfits and stuff. Now, in MK11, he has the addition of his new weapon, the Qatar, which is actually an Indian weapon. Yeah. And not only that, it relates back to, sort of significance of class or status, really. And you can see these sorts of different themes which come along with the character's origins, right? Which all sort of add to that character. But then on top of that, there was a specific character I wanted to bring up. Now, I guess if you haven't finished Rain's ending in Mortal Kombat 11, maybe watch it before you get to this.
We're okay
with
this.
Oh, yeah.
They've been out for a while.
Yep. All right. Okay. So Rain's mother is finally revealed, and her name is revealed to be Amara, a name with multiple possible origins. We have Latin, where it means everlasting, Greek, where it's unfading, African, where it's grace, Arab, sweetheart or dear, and then Indian, eternal, imperishable. And it's very interesting to see that maybe they're just drawing from all these different sort of aspects, even in one character.
Well, I think that also just goes to show that Edenia has always been very, very diverse, and being from a different realm, you can, and Edenia specifically, but just being in a different realm in general. But we're talking about here Edenia. You can mix and match kind of different ethnicities and ethical influences in a character, but they don't have to be tied. They're not tied to one thing. Of course, you really can't because they're Edenian, but from a different realm, a made up realm. But I think that goes to show that how like the diversity in Edenia. So
it's very obvious that where they've drawn their influences from, because the thing is, it kind of goes back to what I said earlier, right? Of it being a much larger world, and that it's not just simply just these 2 different things. If it's an entire world, then it explains the difference of heritage and how maybe in this Edenian world, as it is described to be, that maybe all cultures and influences have merged into one. Maybe they've never expanded or touched on that, and maybe the reason they've never actually expanded or touched on that is because it's never been an issue, right? Maybe they just all live in harmony with each other regardless of region. And I think what also goes to because I feel like Rain is the perfect antithesis of a character who's kind of like the perfect patriot taken to in an extreme manner of he's very proud of his heritage, not because he's born of the heritage, but he is of royal blood. So he feels entitled to what's already there. So he's proud of his heritage, not because he's born from it, but he's like, I'm better than you. I'm going to tell you, I'm better than you. And then I'm going to show you why I'm better than you. I mean, it even comes through in his colors and his designs, right? A royal crisp, Greek gold. It's shown in his design, a royal purple to show divinity, heritage, and, just like wealth. I feel is one of the really, really strong things. And he exuberates it through his communication, through how he designs, even in his costumes, he has like a Greek god-based costume, which is completely unique to the rest of the roster, who do unfortunately in some cases get a little bit bogged down by the palette swaps, but it's very, very clear there, and it exuberates his very larger than life persona and his birthright.
Yeah,
not bad for a guy who started out as literally a joke about Prince.
Yeah. Come a long way. Come a long, long way.
So within the television and movie and entertainment industry, we've seen a lot of characters make the way from being on print into becoming on movies. And there are quite a lot of people in the redheaded community that complain about characters becoming black characters that used to be previously redhead in previous media. So my question is, do you guys feel like Mortal Kombat has had any character that has significantly changed their race to something that excludes who they previously were, or change their race in a way that doesn't contribute to their storyline.
In the games or like across media, like
Either way, yeah.
Because Ermac had darker skin originally, I'm pretty sure.
Mm-hmm.
Then just suddenly that was changed. Then you have Jade, where it's just flip a coin every time they make a new game.
Yeah, yeah. With the MK Mobile, they whitewashed her. I don't know why.
MK Mobile went. She was Asian in MK Mobile, I think.
The Malibu comics in the 90s did the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
They had a very fair skin close to Kitana, even though I'm pretty sure in the game she was always darker skinned.
Yeah.
Yes, she always was.
It's strange.
She's gone through some very weird changes, actually, because as you said, flip a coin. In Deception, to me, she felt Indonesian, I would say, in terms of a specific sort of influence. And then each game after that, or even before that, she's always looked something different, right? And then you, as we just said as well, MK Mobile. It just keeps
inconsistent,
changing over and over.
Even with some characters, if you can identify them still as the same race overall, it still changes a lot. Like Jax's skin tone has changed quite a lot over the last 4 games or so. It's very different, especially in 2011. It's a weird thing.
Yeah,
I feel like the thing with Jax that makes it different is that yes, that might be changing, I guess, just in terms of possible like art style choices, etc. But we all know consistently his origin.
We know,
what I mean?
African American or black. Like, there's just no question whether or not like he's brown or black or anything. He's black.
Mm-hmm.
It's more a question of whether he will be written that way or if he'll have some nuance to his character. Because sometimes there isn't. I'll take Homeboy, says Jax.
No, I'm thinking of Deadly Alliance's alternate.
That's the peak of it. Like, you'll never top that.
Totally not a commentary on black and yellow. It's just, that was not subtle at all.
I think with Jax and a lot of the other characters, a lot of that depends on where their actors are from or where their face models are from. Because as we've seen with Jax, I mean, he's gone through so many iterations and so many various people portraying him that it's affected his look in each game. Which isn't the same as with Jade, who they've just kind of tweaked their look on each game. Do you know what I mean?
I wouldn't say tweaked for Jade. I would just say like completely.
Well, they made her Asian. They made her Asian in the movie.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, so like Jade originally, she was just a palette swap, and they palette swapped the skin tone too. So I mean, they've kind of tweaked what they looked like from their palette swaps and stuff like that. But Jax has always been an individual actor who has kind of changed how they've looked throughout each game.
Yeah.
To be fair, though, I think that ties into what was mentioned earlier, where no actual design choice for a character remains the same across all the games. I can't quote it, but I feel like I've read something where an employee of NRS has said, we always try to do something different with each character in the following game because we don't want to just stick to one thing. We always want to just try and change it up slightly whilst trying to maintain some little consistency. Now, I don't feel that much of that consistency has actually remained, but I can see why.
What kind of impact does that have on changing a character throughout each game?
Oh no, I think to me, I think whether Jade it has Middle Eastern influence, it doesn't really matter what influence she has, but I think as long as she's black, I think that's very important, and I think if you change that, that's very very I don't think that's good, because Jade is the first black female fighter in a fighting game, and I think that's very very important, and to kind of change her to Asian or change her to white, I think that's just not as well. Just don't do that.
I never realized she was the first one.
Yeah, she was. Yeah.
And then thinking about it, there aren't many in general.
Well, there's a few, but but Jade is the first one, so I think that's very very important. I think Black Panther is the first black Marvel hero. I don't. I think he is.
I'll take a look.
I think he is. But
I don't think it helps that I don't actually consider Jade the first black. I just don't consider Jade black.
Yeah, I consider her
Full stop.
Indonesian or
Well,
Southeast
look,
Asian.
black
Yeah.
is a skin color, so you can be,
Yeah.
you can be black from Jamaica, you can be black from Puerto Rico. There's different things. Just as I think, as long as she's black,
Oh yeah, no.
I think that's good. It's
It
like,
just it relates back to what I was saying earlier about how I don't think it's just white or black.
well, yeah.
I feel like there's in
That's
between
why I
too,
said it
you know
doesn't
what I
really
mean?
matter
Yeah.
like where like specifically she's from. Just as long as she's like black, I
skin.
think dark skin. Yeah.
Somewhat darker skin, basically. Yeah. I'm with you on
It
that.
applies to like Jax as well. Like I was saying, like his tone has changed quite a bit between the various games, but it's still, you can still easily identify him as black. So it's not like it's not like when
Yes.
Jade, because it was such a stark difference. It's very clearly not anything like what she was before. Or same with Ermac, but then Ermac, no one cared for whatever reason. But yeah, with Jax, there's always at least a basic level of consistency there. So it's not a huge deal. It's just one of those things you look at and go, it's kind of weird, but you can forgive it.
But yeah, Brusk, you were actually right with Black Panther, by the way. Appeared in Fantastic Four 52 on July 1966.
Yeah, I knew I was
Originally
right.
conceived by Jack
Oh, wow.
Kirby as actually Cole Panther, the Black Panther at first.
That's
Yeah,
cool.
so if you like change Black Panther to where he's like white or something or Asian, get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, no, I feel like at this point, if you were to change any one of ethnic diversity, it's a kind of a red flag.
Yeah.
A red
Backlash.
flag, to say the least.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I said, like, with Jade, she can be, you can have African American influence in there, you can have Jamaican influence, you can have Puerto Rican influence or Middle East influence, just as long as she's black. I think just
Yeah.
the skin color, dark skin, I think
Just-
that's just very, very important.
I think it comes down to
Mm.
also exposure of the character,
Yeah.
because if you were around during like the older days of like the arcade days where you saw her in like a different skin tone and color, like that's how you knew Jade. I knew Jade from seeing her in Deception. So that was my introduction to Jade. That's how I've always seen Jade. It's just
Yeah.
not of Eastern Asian
Yes.
influence. So it's just one of those things. It's a weird inconsistency.
What if they were to take a
Mm.
like a sub character, like a not as popular white character, and change their skin tone? How would you guys feel about that?
Cobra.
Yeah.
Cobra.
I would not generally like be a fan. It just depends on like how, like, because with me in the diversity, it's generally like, in what way does it kind of benefit the character in that sense? Like with when I talked about Rain, of course, that there's a lot of his heritage that's like, it's clearly a part of his character. Whereas with Sub-Zero, it's just like, it's a small strand of a much bigger picture, because he isn't defined by his heritage and his birthplace. He's defined by the Lin Kuei.
Yeah.
Rain is defined by his bloodline because it's tied to his heritage. Like, even I would say like a character Liu Kang, whilst clearly Oriental, very heavily inspired by Bruce Lee, isn't a character that's defined as a character from China from his own perspective, because he doesn't identify as it, but he represents strong aspects of Oriental culture. And it isn't so much by choice, but it's just who he is as a person and a character, right? Because the impact that Bruce Lee had with what he had in the East and brought over to the West basically helped propel him into a point of like, it was a cultural impact. One person had a huge cultural impact on how the West then saw like Eastern influences. And whilst there was the stereotype of, Oriental people and, what they are doing martial arts, like Bruce Lee really encapsulated that somewhat stereotype, but transformed it into a positive manner. Made it like a real strong part of Eastern culture. So there's different parts like that.
Okay.
There's also the aspect of when you look at the various movies, and of course we have a new movie. And one thing I was going to get at is, like I mentioned earlier, I love the fact that they're actually branching out, diversifying some of the characters, and a lot of the characters that were originally palette swaps, they're actually putting the work in to establish these characters with certain ethnicities, certain cultures that they're attributed to. And we've seen over the years, and this ties into a few different points, but when you look at the original 1995 movie, you had Raiden played by a Frenchman. You had an American playing a character that's Japanese, being Scorpion. You had another French martial artist play Sub-Zero. And one of the things with that is I always look at how, what the purpose of the character is. So when you look at the original 95 movie, Scorpion and Sub-Zero, they don't really use their storylines. They're just henchmen for Shang Tsung. And at that point, Threshold Entertainment, and you got to go to, as much as everyone probably despises this, if you look at Mortal Kombat, The Journey Begins, the cartoon movie, they had a completely different origin story for Sub-Zero and Scorpion, with both of them belonging to clans that existed in Outworld. Now, it looks like they eventually discarded that, at least partially, for Mortal Kombat Conquest, though the TV show did connect it more where the Lin Kuei kind of served Shang Tsung in a sense. Mm-hmm. But in the 95 movie, I didn't find it as big of a deal that these two ninjas were being played by non-Asian actors, because they, for the purpose of the story, they never established that they were Earthrealm characters. At least when you only look at the 95 movie. Whereas as the story is kind of developed and they actually gave them proper origin. I'm happy that the newer movie has decided to hire Asian actors to fill those roles. Like, even looking at something like Mortal Kombat Legacy, where they finally did show a variation of Scorpion and Sub-Zero's intertwined storyline. If they had done the same thing as what they had done in the 1995 movie, that would have really came off as awkward. And I still, to this day, I really don't know how I actually see Raiden, because Christopher Lambert's casting in the 95 movie, I think, was more a marketing move. I want to say it was marketing due to his success in Highlander. And he seemed to be very popular in France. So kind of getting certain actors, veteran actors, to fill in certain roles. Like,
well, they kept that going too with Conquest when they got James Meek to come in.
Yeah. And there's Threshold Entertainment kind of had their own established mythology in terms of how they saw the character. Which, I mean, we're at the point now where, Conquest is the last installment within Threshold Entertainment's Mortal Kombat library. That was 22 years ago. Since then, the entire series has kind of moved forward, and there's new interpretations of the characters, especially when they rebooted it 9 years ago. So with the upcoming movie, they're actually showing a lot of the characters based around their origin. So you have a Japanese actor playing Scorpion. You have a Japanese actor playing Raiden. You have a Chinese actor playing Shang Tsung. Right?
And you got CC Stringer, though, playing Melina, which a lot of people are kind of upset about that, because she is Australian origin, but she's more dark-skinned.
Yeah, that again, it gets in.
Well, see, I'm like, if you want to do that, then make Katana the same way, but they're not going to do that.
Yeah. That's kind of I
think. Or they will, and they'll have Jade be the princess. And she'll be like that.
I guess I can sort of piggyback off of what Brandon was saying. I guess, how do we feel about them using actors of different origins, aesthetic looks from their actual characters? So now, in this day and age, how would people feel about, say, Christopher Lambert playing Raiden at this point in time?
I don't think people would mind nowadays. I mean, like, I think people should understand that Raiden could look like anyone. I know, like, Raiden, like Raijin is like a Japanese and things like that. So you could, so if you want to make him look Japanese, you can. But if you want to make him look like Lambert, or like how he's in the games, which is kind of unclear, but if you want to do that, I think it's fine. And also, I think people understand that he's Lambert is the original Raiden, or the person who kind of brought him to life.
At the same time, though, we're currently in a society where people are quitting their voice acting jobs because they're not playing the correct race. And so
I think that's a very problematic thing. Honestly, I think because like your voice is supposed to be different. Like you're supposed to act like it's different when you're like on screen. But your voice is supposed to be somebody you're not. I know
So-
you can also say the same thing for actors, but that's you're seeing somebody. You're trying to sound like you're not the person.
So what you're saying is actors should pretend like there's somebody that they're not.
Well, I mean, like that's no, like okay. So if I wanted to like voice a black guy, I would have to do a black guy voice. I think that's I don't think that's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
I know it is a problem because some voice actors are kind of like doing that, and I've seen a lot of feedback saying like, I don't think this is what we mean by equality.
Yeah.
That's the general. That's your general response. Like, okay, thank you. I know what you're trying to do, but we're not going to go that far. That's the general response that I've seen, even from people who are black and of just of the people that they're like not trying to portray anymore.
Well, it's kind of political correctness taken to an extreme at the moment.
And when that happened, it was during the Black Lives Matter movement and things like that.
Yeah,
So
that's
it was kind of like it's kind of like a response to that. But even then, response came pretty immediately. Like, okay, this isn't what we mean by like
Doesn't
equality
exactly
and
help
things
the
like that.
cause.
Yeah,
It doesn't. Yeah. I mean, if we were to go that way, then Christopher Judge, for example, who played Kratos in God of War. I mean, are we going to say that he couldn't have played somebody who's not black? Like that, he's an amazing.
Of Phil Lamar.
Or Phil Lamar, yeah, amazing voice
As
actors.
Aquaman, and you can argue Kotal as well. Is he necessarily fit for them based on his race? Well, if you ignore the race and focus on the performance, he's damn good in those roles.
Mhm.
So everything else should not matter.
Exactly.
What matters is the performance. He's damn good. Let him stay. But people just don't look at things in a rational way anymore.
I wanted to bring up a couple points because first off, when it comes to Mortal Kombat, there are individuals that know Mortal Kombat only because of the 1995 movie. And they know that it's based on a video game, but have not played it. And without naming the YouTube channel, because I don't want to give them any traffic, there was a channel that did a video after the casting announcement for the new movie. And of course, they because the movie is trying to get a lot of actors of various Asian cultures to play Asian characters, or at least what you would imagine some of the characters to be. Like, for example, Raiden, even in the entire video game series, he's never been distinctly portrayed as Japanese. In fact, I kind of wonder if not only because they're trying to be ambiguous with the idea that he is a god, so he doesn't necessarily represent certain ethnicity, a certain origin, but I also wonder if that's kind of like a legacy concept where they're being respectful to Carlos Pesina, who originally played Raiden, and we're just trying to keep kind of like that element to it, where they just kept that going. But there was a channel when the movie casting was announced, and they made a huge deal about how Raiden was played by a white guy in the 95 movie, and lo and behold, they have a Japanese guy playing this character, and they're trying to claim that Raiden was a white character, and now they're doing it for diversity reasons. And they're like, well, by the way, I've never played any of the video games. I've only seen the original movie. And without putting words in their mouth, I almost swear they were making a huge deal about Sub-Zero and Scorpion being played by Asian actors. It was really weird. Really weird. And it was like watching a car accident.
That sounds
it's slow motion that was on fire and full of puppies.
Yeah. Oh God.
This is Mortal Kombat.
so there's that aspect to it where there probably are going to be some people out there that take offense to the idea that these characters are going to be portrayed the way they actually should be portrayed. I don't have really one way or another in terms of like who should play Raiden. I do like the idea that he is going to be Japanese because it connects into the mythological origins of where the character stems from, because, the character is based on Raijin, which, if I understand it correctly, if I still remember some of my Japanese history, Raijin was the original demon name of the character that when he converted to Buddhism, he actually changed his name to Raiden. So I don't know what the entire story behind that was, but Raiden is a Japanese god. So the idea that he would be played by a Japanese man, I kind of like the idea that connects into actual Japanese mythology.
Yeah, I don't think it
But
hurts.
if-
I don't think it hurts to have him be Japanese. But then again, at the same time, you're like in the games, it doesn't like specifically state that, but we just know that was the inspiration. So I feel like if you want to do Lambert Raiden again, which unfortunately they're not going to do, and the closest thing we got is of course MK11 recently. But still, like if they wanted to do Lambert Raiden, you can say, well, it's not specifically really even stated in the game. So if you want to go to go back and look at the origins, it's not really that clear. You're just going off of like what inspired the name and things like that. But him being Japanese again, it doesn't hurt at all to me.
And what would really make me happy is like, for example, if they were repeating the same decisions for this new movie, if they're going to get a Caucasian to play Raiden, it's got to be because of the acting quality. Like for me, I really loved Christopher Lambert's interpretation of Raiden. I love his voice. Like it comes down to the same thing with Cary Hiroki Tagawa, because he's such a thespian that he lives that role. Like it's just so easy for him, I guess, to just put on his wardrobe and like walk out, and he's able to just live and breathe as Shang Tsung. And for Christopher Lambert, like I loved his voice, and that brought a certain angle to Raiden that I just wouldn't expect. Like, but I can't just say like just throw a white guy in to play Raiden, because they did that in Annihilation with James Remar, and it just didn't work.
It was a new look,
yeah, God. And let me tell you something. That decision was completely fucked when they decided to make him mortal, because that was the perfect opportunity to give him his video game outfit, and they completely were like, no, we're just gonna throw some random clothes on him with some bleached blonde hair.
Well, I think what it was is like, okay, we don't have Kung Lao in the game, so at least let's have somebody look like Kung Lao a little bit. So and they just gave it to Raiden for no reason.
All right, so mentioning Raiden's voice and his, I guess, Christopher Lambert playing as him. Now, what about with, say, face models as well as the actual voice actors? Now, Scorpion is a great example of this. We've had Patrick Seitz playing as Scorpion in Mortal Kombat, I think from DC until X, and then all of a sudden Scorpion, firstly, now his face model's changed, and I think we have, if I remember correctly, a Filipino face model, and then I'm not sure.
Yeah, a Japanese
I think
voice.
a Japanese
Ron Yu, I
voice
think his
actor?
name
Yeah.
is.
Yes.
And did you know that that's not the first time he played Scorpion?
Really?
Yeah.
When was the other time?
Mortal Kombat Generations, the
Yeah?
unreleased web series.
Oh, what
Oh,
the fuck?
cool.
Really? I did not know that.
I'm 99%
Huh.
sure.
That's
I've
news
never
to
even
me.
heard of it.
It's weird to me, speaking about how we apparently can't have somebody who's not the same origin as the character now playing that character, but we had Patrick Seitz do an amazing job for a very long time with Scorpion, only to be, from what it seemed to be, unceremoniously like thrown out the window without even being told that he wasn't playing Scorpion until the trailer dropped.
Ouch.
Which is how we found out.
He's just such a good fit for the role, because there is an intensity to a lot of the characters he plays, and that is really good for Scorpion, a character who's typically motivated by vengeance. And you see it a lot, particularly in. It's known that I didn't much care for Scorpion's revenge, but I think he was one of the highlights of it, because he put in, as usual, his A game, a great performance, and for him to have been playing the character, doing such a good job for effectively a decade, if you discount 11 and count Scorpion's revenge, and then he's just dropped in favor of someone else who is more ethnically appropriate. And nothing against the new actor. He does a fine job with that. I mean, he certainly fits
a great job,
Hanzo, I would say. The wizened post-Scorpion version of Hanzo. But do we really want to give up, have a fine performance and give up a fantastic one just because of the ethnicity of the voice actors?
Well, the thing is that I don't think it was because of the ethnicity. Because if that was the case, then Carrie Walgreen wouldn't be playing Katana and Melina. Or so I don't think it had to do anything with like ethnically appropriate, because at the time they were recasting, it wasn't at the height of like controversy or anything like that. Like that wasn't a big subject. What I think actually was the decision to change Scorpion's voice to sound more Japanese, just why they decided to change to the person who voices Scorpion now from Sights, was because Scorpion was more calm in this game. Like he wasn't this angry Scorpion anymore. And I don't think that Sights really has too much to offer with that kind of version of the character, because in Scorpion's Revenge he was like super. There's a little bit. I know you're gonna bring up like, there's MKX scenes and things like that where he's kind of like the calmer version. Yeah, at MK9 a little bit.
MK9,
but like I still feel like it fits Scorpion better a little bit. And Scorpion's Revenge, like Patrick Sights at his best is angry Scorpion, and you're not gonna get that in MK11. It's just not even there.
So it's acting range and not race.
Yeah, I think it's just the acting range. No, I'm not saying that Patrick Sights can't do it, but the fact that Patrick Sights, his main thing known for Scorpion is saying vengeance will be mine, or I will see you in hell, or things like that, with this angry tone, that's just not there in MK11 because Scorpion has changed. He's grown up.
There are,
but this is
man literally too angry to die.
This is making the assumption that that the casting for MK11 was done based on how well they fit the character. And if that was the case, we wouldn't have gotten Ronda Rousey as Sonya. So
I feel like I feel like that's just like an exception of like, Ronda, like Ronda's always been a huge MK fan. She's always been like a huge Sonya fan. And so like, they were like, you know what? Because we're already getting these celebrities actors, let's just do it for Sonya, just for this one thing.
There was a petition for.
Yeah, but Sonya of all people, Trisha Helfer. Yeah. Come on, we lost Trisha Helfer.
Yeah, I'm not gonna say that Ronda Rousey is good or anything. I don't think she's that bad. I mean, like if you're a Mortal Kombat fan, you would know that there's been worse voice acting before. I think it's just a meme, and I think it's kind of funny. Yeah,
MK4 was a masterpiece, and you know it.
There's other possibilities for why Scorpion was recast, and that kind of gets into some of the elements of Hollywood. That there's probably some similarities, because if you remember, Matt Mullins was playing Johnny Cage in Legacy, and that was a holdover from Rebirth. And he was the choice of the director to play Johnny Cage. When it came to Legacy 2, they obviously replaced him with Casper Van Dien. And when asked about it, Matt Mullins said that he had to audition again, just like it was a new part, and he lost out to Casper Van Dien. And what you found out was the director did not have final choice for who he wanted his actors to be. And there's always the possibility of when it came to Mortal Kombat 11, sort of the same ordeal where a lot of the actors had to re-audition. There could have been salary disputes. We don't always get a lot of the full stories, but it could have been that they went with Ron Yoon for money reasons. It could have been that, Ed Boon's not in charge of all the different aspects. And it gets kind of weird, because I know there was some discussions I had online regarding NetherRealm Studios versus Midway. And there's this, I think some fans have this idea that NetherRealm Studios doesn't answer to anyone. I've heard things in that regard as well. And the thing is that NetherRealm Studios, they're still going to have certain voices made by Warner Brother Games, because Warner Brother Games is going to handle their marketing. It's going to handle, they're probably looking at what's trending, what aspects that they should be marketing the game to. And I would say that some of their marketing choices worked, because Mortal Kombat 11, I think, is like the biggest Mortal Kombat game in terms of sales and popularity now.
Yeah, I think probably by the end of this year, it's probably going to surpass MKX sales. And that was pretty fast, because MKX got to this point at 2017 or something like that. So yeah, MK11 has been very, very successful with the marketing and things. I think this is probably the best marketed game.
It just gets kind of strange when you think about it, because they still kept Patrick Seitz for the animated movie they made. So you'd think in the name of brand synergy, they would have wanted to keep him in both or replace him in both. It's just a bizarre thing.
It is, but then again, I don't, because in Scorpion's Revenge, that's all Scorpion was the anger, the rage kind of angry Scorpion. So I think it calls for Patrick Seitz, and also maybe a bit. It was okay, well, let's look. We have this iconic Scorpion. Everybody knows this guy is Scorpion as well. We changed him, but we still know this. People recognize him as Scorpion, so let's just bring him back.
For me, it comes down to kind of ethnic diversity versus talent, which I feel like is a lot of what this conversation is. And I feel like Brusk has the perfect answer for it right now, with just kind of the fact that Seitz is able to capitalize and really control the sheer level of aggression and exuberate in such a way, whereas 11 takes it in a different direction. But I feel like that could kind of be argued up until a certain point in the chapter with the other Scorpion from the previous timeline. I hate timelines. So there's just it's kind of juggling, but that definitely does make a lot more sense. But I definitely think for someone who's been portraying a character for as long as he has and who did not get the call back until the reveal, I think that must have been some kind of creative decision behind closed doors that was probably outside of his hands when it comes to something like that. Because, straight up getting dropped at a doorstop and not finding out about it till basically being the last person to find out about it, pretty shitty thing to have happen. So
it's very, very shitty, which I don't like at all. But I hear this happens all the time in voice acting. I'm not saying well, get with the program. No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I'm not surprised with that kind of stuff. That shit just happens.
I feel like the reason that I think that it was for diversity reasons is because Patrick went from not being told a single thing about MK11, finding out via the trailer's release that he wasn't voicing Scorpion, to later voicing the animated movie. And that's why I feel like WB had more say in this, for example, than NRS would have, or than they would have had with the actual movie release.
That was executively done behind closed doors. I feel like that is the case, because it like we just mentioned, it doesn't make sense for him to be in the movie and to not be in the game. So maybe it might have been a fee thing. I personally think that it does come down to money at the end of the day when it comes down to casting. Because, if you're paying an actor, I'm pretty sure actors make more money off doing video games now than they would do for any movie.
If he didn't even know that he was going to be voicing Scorpion, then he probably didn't even know that MK11 was going to even be coming out.
Yeah.
Maybe he was the thing is these actors aren't the developers, so I don't think they would know the development process. Hey guys, is Scorpion going to be in the game? Is Patrick Seitz isn't going to ask if Lee May is going to be on the roster or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
If
Twitter cries,
yeah, he could have the Scorpion's Revenge was in development since 2016. So they probably got Patrick Seitz to voice Scorpion again, in 2017 or 2018 or something like that. So he probably knew he voiced Scorpion, but he thought it was going to be for the movie, and he thought that was the only new thing about Mortal Kombat that was going to be coming out. And then when the game comes out, he's like, "Wait a second, I didn't voice this. That's how I find out." I don't think he thought he was just completely dropped and then. Oh, okay, never mind. He and WB saw him all sad and everything. He's like, okay, we'll bring you back. I think he just didn't know that there was a new game coming out.
Yeah, but the importance here, in my opinion, is that he didn't know. Whereas in the past, he would have actually been informed of the fact that they'd like him to reprise his role. This time, he didn't even hear about it, and the fact that he wasn't even considered is something interesting.
I want to sound. I know I sound like an asshole, but I seriously don't. I wish he was informed. I feel like that's how you should. I feel like that's how it should go, but that's how the voice actor thing kind of like works and everything like that. I know he has a special connection to Scorpion and everything, and he should be, but it's just the system, which I mean, I'm not saying I like. I'm trying not my hardest not to sound like an asshole, but I think that's just how it goes.
Really, that is how studios can be. I really think it just came down to they had a certain idea in mind, and I'm sure all of you remember the debacle with Metal Gear Solid 5 and with David Hayter not being asked at all to come back and reprise Solid Snake, which he was the only actor for Solid Snake. Well, it wasn't Solid Snake, it was Big Boss, but he was voicing both roles. And to have him not asked back and being replaced with Kiefer Sutherland, that was just kind of a dick move, considering that was the last game that had Snake in it. So again, that's the studio system. I mean, even George Romero working on Resident Evil, he never found out he was fired until a news article. I mean, there's an interview with a Capcom employee saying that he was fired. And that was the same thing with there's a lot of different stories that you could pull from to see how some studios act. Again, no one's really sure of the reason why they would change voice actors for a character in this instance. Like I said, the fact that you had one actor play the character for so many games and then they don't even ask him to come back. That could have been, again, like a financial reason between all the characters that they have being voice acted. They could have looked at it and said, well, he's asking a little bit too much. And again, that's when you get into like agents. You have, agents and producers, higher ups for the studio versus the agent for the actor. And there's always that possibility where they're like, this guy, he might want too much money for this role. Or they could have already knew what his salary was. We're like, yeah, we're not going to pay that again. We're going to go with another actor and we're going to take this character in a different approach. So it really, and I'm not trying to say that is what happened because,
but I think the basis here is that I don't think it's black and white. I think there was just multiple factors or there was just something else that was going on. I don't think it had to do with anything like to be ethnically appropriate, because if that was the case, then they would have replaced Steve Blum. They would have had Kerry Walgreen. And, I think there's a couple of others that I'm just not remembering.
And again, it is interesting that they replaced him with Ron Yoon, who had previously played Scorpion. So they were probably already aware of what he did within that web series that we are probably never going to see.
Well, I think the web series, if that's the case, then the web series probably had like a calmer Scorpion. Maybe. We don't know. But and if they're like, wait, that's the kind of approach that we want, they'll probably do that. I don't know. I'm just assuming. But I think that's how he does a good job, or that's why he does a good job, is because he plays the version of Scorpion, MK11 Scorpion really, really well.
So does anybody else have any final comments on the whole representation within Mortal Kombat topic that we've been discussing today?
Well, I do have one thought, which is, so Raiden being a god, you can argue that even if he is very clearly inspired by the Japanese God of Thunder and has a very distinctly Japanese influenced design, you can argue that because he's a god, he doesn't have to fit any of our mortal ethnicities and such. But I think what people kind of overlook is, if you do say that Raiden has to be Japanese, then shouldn't that apply to Fujin as well, who is very much darker skinned, especially in the earlier appearances?
Well, I think there's darker skinned Japanese people, so I think you can get away with that.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I've never seen one as dark as Fujin was earlier on. Maybe when he's in 11.
Which Fujin
he's
are you talking about? Are you
there.
talking about MK11 Fujin?
Well, more so before that, when he was like around like Armageddon and MK4.
I never really saw it like that dark. I kind of just saw it as a typical, like, a little bit darker, but not anything outside of like somebody who's dark Japanese, or it can be Okinawan or something like that. So,
True.
Yeah. For me, the difference between the two wouldn't even be the skin color. If anything, right now with MK11, I would say that Raiden looks quite Caucasian, if anything, in comparison to Fujin, who looks slightly more Asian. But I think This has been an interesting discussion, in my opinion. It's pretty cool hearing everybody of different origins discussing this sort of thing. We might all have different opinions on certain aspects, but I think we've all made that clear with what I'd say is a pretty in-depth discussion here. So
yeah, thank you guys. Thank you all, everybody, for joining us today.
Thank you all.
Hey, real quick before we let you all go, do you guys want to give a quick plug on where our listeners can find you?
Starting with,
let's start with The4thSnake.
okay.
Well, the 4thSnake on YouTube. That's with a 4, not the word. It's the 4th. I've never, I don't know, say that was a problem with finding me, so I don't know why I always specified that, but it seemed like the kind of thing that you should specify.
And by the way, my name is spelled BruskPoet, BRUSK, not Brusk. I don't even know. I'm just trying to make a joke.
I think it's like QUE normally.
It is actually.
Yeah, I've also got DeviantArt and archive of our own, fanfiction.net, under the same name. You can go there to find my Mortal Kombat fanfiction, which I'm very proud of. And a lot of people seem to like, so you might find something you like there. And I'm on Twitter @4thSnake because, as I've said before, someone took the 4thSnake and I'm still not over it. This is like 7 years ago and I'm still not over it.
All right, and History Behind the Warrior, where can our listeners find you?
Well, as you said, History Behind the Warrior on YouTube. You can find me on there. If you wish to get in contact with me in more of a direct basis, I'm also on Twitter @HBTheWarrior. So don't worry, 4thSnake, I get your pain. The account as HBTWarrior has been taken for 11 years, so I feel your hell. If you also want to find me on more of a gaming basis, I do stream on Twitch every Friday and Sunday. You expect fighting games, but I will bond you with Devil May Cry instead. You can also find me on the Mortal Kombat 11 Pro League in Europe as a part of the 4-man commentary team. So if you're interested in that, please do dive in and take a look.
All right. And Brandon, how about yourself?
You can find me on Twitter. The Twitter account is Channel Midnight Productions, but it's @MrMidniteOwl.
All right. And BruskPoet.
You can find me on YouTube. My name is BruskPoet on YouTube, and you can also find me on Twitch. I stream every Monday, Wednesday, Saturday at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Stream a lot of Mortal Kombat mainly. Then I usually sometimes go and watch some YouTube videos with the chat. We just chill and have fun. So if you like that and you're interested in that, go ahead and follow me on those two things. And also on Twitter. Same thing.
Yeah.
Sorry, is that Brusk with a K or with a QUE?
All right. And you can find Yanni and myself, FANTiM, on the Mortal Kombat group on Facebook, as well as Yanni on the Mortal Kombat meme realm. We'd like to thank all of our listeners for stopping by today, and thank you to each of our guests for joining us in this roundtable discussion. Also, special thanks to Uppercut Editions for their continued support. You can find them at Encyclopedia MK on Twitter and the Mortal Kombat Encyclopedia Project on Facebook. You can catch up on all episodes of the Realm Kast on YouTube, Facebook, iTunes, and Spotify. Thank you.
Need a safe space?